So all this was about decreasing the fudge factor. What about increasing the fudge factor? The first experiment, I walked around MIT and I distributed 6 packs of Cokes in the refrigerators. These were common refrigerators for the undergrads. And I came back to measure what we technically call the half-lifetime of Coke. How long does it last in the refrigerators? And you can expect it doesn't last very long. People take it. In contrast, I took a plate with 6 $1 bills and I left those plates in the same refrigerators. No bill was ever disappeared. Now, this is not a good social science experiment. So to do it better, I did the same experiment as I described to you before. A third of the people, we passed the sheet, they gave it back to us. A third of the people, we passed it, they shredded it, they came to us and said, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems, give me X dollars. A third of the people, when they finished shredding the piece of paper, they came to us and said, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems, give me X tokens. We did not pay them with dollars, we paid them with something else. And then they took this something else, they walked 12 feet to the side and exchanged it for dollars. Think about the following intuition. How bad would you feel about taking a pencil from work home compared to how bad would you feel about taking 10 cents from a petty cash box? These things feel very differently. Would being a step removed from cash for a few seconds by being paid by a token make a difference? Our subjects double their cheating. I'll tell you what I think about this in the stock market in a minute. But this did not solve the big problem I had with Enron yet, because in Enron there's also a social element. People see each other behaving. In fact, every day when we open the news, we see examples of people cheating. What does this causes us? So we did another experiment. We got a big group of students to be in the experiment, and we prepaid them. So everybody got an envelope with all the money for the experiment, and we told them that at the end, we asked them to pay us back the money they didn't make. Okay? The same thing happens when we give people the opportunity to cheat. They cheat just by a little bit, all the same. But in this experiment, we also hired an acting student. This acting student stood up after 30 seconds and said, I solved everything. What do I do now? And the experimenter said, if you finished everything, go home. That's it. The task is finished. So now we had a student, an acting student, that was a part of the group. Nobody knew it was an actor. And they clearly cheated in a very, very serious way. What would happen to the other people in the group? Will they cheat more or will they cheat less? Here is what happens. It turns out it depends on what kind of sweatshirt they're wearing. Here's the thing. We ran this at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. And at Pittsburgh, there are 2 big universities, Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh. All of the subjects sitting in the experiment were Carnegie Mellon students. When the actor was getting up, was a Carnegie Mellon student. He was actually a Carnegie Mellon student, but he was a part of their group. Cheating went up. But when he actually had the University of Pittsburgh sweatshirt, cheating went down. Now this is important because remember, when the moment the student stood up, it made it clear to everybody that they could get away with cheating. Because the experimenter said, you finished everything, go home, and they worked with the money. So it wasn't so much about the probability of being caught again, it was about the norms for cheating. If somebody from our in-group cheats, and we see them cheating, we feel it's more appropriate as a group to behave this way. But if it's somebody from another group, these terrible people, I mean not terrible in this, but somebody we don't want to associate ourselves with, from another university, another group, all of a sudden people's awareness of honesty goes up, a little bit like the 10 Commandments experiment, and people cheat even less. So what have we learned from this about cheating? We've learned that a lot of people can cheat. They cheat just by a little bit. When we remind people about their morality, they cheat less. When we get bigger distance from cheating, from the object of money, for example, people cheat more. And when we see things of cheating around us, particularly if it's a part of our in-group, cheating goes up. Now, if we think about this in terms of the stock market, think about what happens. What happens in a situation when you create something where you pay people a lot of money to see reality in a slightly distorted way? Would they not be able to see it this way? Of course they would. What happens when you do other things, like you remove things from money? You call them stock or stock option, derivatives, mortgage-backed securities. Could it be that with those more distant things, it's not a token for 1 second, it's something that is many steps removed from money for much longer time? Could it be that people would cheat even more? And what happened to the social environment when people see other people behave around them? I think all of those forces worked in a very bad way in the stock market. More generally, I want to tell you something about behavioral economics. We have many intuitions in our life, and the point is that many of these intuitions are wrong. The question is, are we going to test those intuitions? We can think about how we're going to test this intuition in our private life, in our business life, and most particularly when it goes to policy, when we think about things like No Child Left Behind, when you create new stock markets, when you create other policies, taxation, healthcare, and so on. And the difficulty of testing our intuition was the big lesson I learned when I went back to the nurses to talk to them. So I went back to talk to them and tell them what I found out about removing bandages. And I learned two interesting things. One was that my favorite nurse, Etty, told me that I did not take her pain into consideration. She said, of course, it was very painful for you, but think about me as a nurse. Removing the bandages of somebody I liked and had to do it repeatedly over a long period of time, creating so much torture, was not something that was good for me too. And she said maybe part of the reason was that it was difficult for her. But it was actually more interesting than that, because she said, I did not think that your intuition was right. I thought my intuition was correct. So if you think about all of your intuitions, think about it's very hard to believe that your intuition is wrong. And she said, given the fact that I thought my intuition was right, she thought her intuition was right, it was very difficult for her to accept doing a difficult experiment to try and check whether she was wrong. But the fact, this is the situation we're all in all the time. We have very strong intuitions about all kinds of things. Our own ability, how the economy works, how we should pay school teachers. But unless we start testing those intuitions, we're not going to do better. And just think about how better my life would have been if these nurses would have been willing to check their intuition, and how everything would have been better if we would just start doing more systematic experimentation of our intuitions. Thank you very much.